Hold on 1 second.
Oh, good.
I'm Kyle Hood. I'm a junior at Galena. I'm a part of the student advisory board.
I'm Nia Andres. I'm senior class president at Reno High, and I'm also part of student advisory board. You guys have introduced yourselves to each other, right? Okay. Then I'll do it again.
We're going to go over discipline, suspensions, major behavior problems, and broken out into different groups. So how many of you have seen like a suspension at your school? So,
Or just someone removed from
Yeah.
class for whatever. All right, just so keep those experiences in mind, just like what you see around your school when we go through these data points, just like connect it back.
So this is going to be your major discipline is going to be the light blue bar, and the dark blue bar is going to be your suspensions. They're broken out in groups, race, and special, like free and reduced lunch, special needs, English language learner, children in transition or homeless children, and then GT, gifted and talented. Major discipline is something you're taken out of class for, but not removed from school. You go back to class, but there is a punishment. Where suspension, you either miss at least a day of school, you're taken out of the classroom for. And so this is out of 100 students. So for the overall, for every 100 students in the county overall, about 46 of them are having a major discipline and 14 are having suspension. So is there anything that just stands out?
I'm confused if it's per 100 students, why is it 105?
Meaning
It's that much more. Like,
every African American in that 100 has had a major discipline, and some having more than one.
oh.
So is there anything that anyone notices or has comments on that maybe doesn't reflect or does reflect?
What's at your school?
Just throw out there some serious stereotypes going on that are kind of
Do you see, like a reason that this might be happening?
No, I wouldn't see why the stereotypes are just there. I just noticed that because like reading some of the labels and then the percentages, it's just kind of like, okay.
I think it's
Sorry, IEP, that's the individual educational
plan.
So I was wondering, I don't understand how they would be majorly disciplined.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good point.
Yeah.
That they're so high.
Yeah, I was expecting to be that high.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of, if you look, I mean, pretty much all the major discipline are within 10%, and then you have your African American IEP and children in transition, the homeless kids are way up there compared to everyone else.
Something that I noticed being a teacher in the classroom and then IS is sometimes students with disabilities, if you present them with a task that's really difficult, it's better to react like, I'm not doing that, so that it's not drawn to the attention that maybe they have a lower reading level or they might not be able to read what's in front of you. So I don't know if that's consistent across the board, but just a couple of experiences that I've had.
And just keep in mind that it's the entire district, not just high schools. Yeah.
Maybe for the CIT, there's people who are like, if they're homeless and they're struggling in school and they have so much other stresses in their life that they can't really focus on school too much. So when they're not focusing on school, they tend to maybe react. Maybe they get so stressed that they kind of react towards the teachers, and then the teachers just kick them out of class. You know, out of sight, out of mind kind of thing. But
Yeah.
there's so many other problems on top of that.
So I'm a dean, which means I deal with a lot of this, right? And the major ones usually, at least when I look at a kids' behavior panel from another school besides mine, it's because things have escalated. So it could be like a disruption in class, disrespectful behavior. Those kinds of things, though, are kind of subjective, right? What I think is disrespectful and what you think is disrespectful might be two totally different things. And I think they can also, like culture can influence that. Like what I might think is appropriate behavior in a certain setting might be really weird to you guys, you know, and so I think sometimes there's judgments made with a cultural lens that is not always very understanding, and I think one of the ways you get there is by having really authentic conversations about where is that behavior coming from, as opposed to, you did this, I'm suspending you, right? It's like, oh, that's not like you, like what's going on? Like, let's get to the heart of what's happening. And I'm not sure there's always time in large comprehensive high schools for those conversations to happen.
So is there any group maybe that's under?
I was just thinking that that conversation definitely needs to happen, because you definitely need to figure out why a student is reacting, especially if they're like regulars, because there's definitely could be like an underlying problem. Because I know I come from kind of like a difficult background, and like it's not like it makes me react in class, but I know like it makes me like sometimes I can't do my homework, or I can't really do the things I need to do at home. And so like I sometimes wish that my teachers would just talk to me about why I'm not doing my homework, or I can like, because I'm usually pretty good about it, but if I don't do it for a week, it's because there's something happening. So I wish that my teachers kind of would just allow me to excuse myself a little bit, because sometimes it's not easy, you know.
And again, relating back to what's being taught at home, something that you do at home may be okay, but once you bring it in the classroom, it's your teacher is like, that's not okay, but you were taught it's fine. So it's different from at home.
So do you think that's a little bit like the teachers being taught kids, but if we think about like a really big school where they have classes of 30 or 7 periods or 8 periods or however many, that maybe it's a little bit, that's something that we can do if I'm getting in trouble. And if I go talk to my teacher and say, this is why I didn't do my homework, this is why I reacted so big to that, then it can kind of be like a back and forth that we can take back to our schools.
Yeah, I really think that communication between students and teachers, I think that if that is the case, then students should feel comfortable going to their teacher and doing that. And I know sometimes they're not, sometimes they're so comfortable that they kind of just accept their punishment, but teachers need to let their students know that I am willing to listen to your reasoning. So.
Yeah.
And I think also sometimes teachers, they will have students who they don't like those students. And the things, little things those students do set them off. And if you had another student that did something like that, to be like, oh, you've done that, but I'm gonna let it slide because I like you do your homework. But then you have those students who say one thing and that teacher decides that student, nothing they say goes, because I've seen students who get kicked out of class every day just because the teacher doesn't like them. So every little thing that student does is suddenly this huge offense that needs to be sent to the office. And I think that's where communication needs to go on, because until they communicate and they not voice their opinions of each other, but they get to the bottom of it, it's just going to keep happening until it results in suspensions and being kicked out.
Yeah.
I think with that, the student like starts to realize how that teacher treats them, so they'll just be like, oh, if I say anything anyways, I'm gonna get kicked out, so might as well keep doing it.
Yeah. And they don't want to be there anymore.
Yeah. So they'll just do anything to get out, to like not take that chance.
Right.
I think one thing that really comes to mind is, I think it's on the second page. No, second page. The racial makeup of all the teachers hasn't changed very much, but if you look at the racial makeup of all the students, that's changed. And I think that's a huge issue with the discrepancy with African American students who make up 3% of our population, yet they are like 105. I don't see how some teachers can send out students repeatedly all the time for that. That's guys, Ferguson, it's the elephant in the room. Majority of police officers are white, majority of offenders are black. It's not a coincidence. This thing is starting in school. I'm sorry, I get on a rant, but that infuriates me that I spend all my time trying to learn about hey, what's going on? I want to know the person. I understand that you have But there's things that are going to happen to you, like, I mean, there's some kids, there's some black kids who have to get rides home because they're afraid someone's going to come by and call them the N-word or kick their butt or worse, kill them. And I've never had to face that. Why? Because I'm white. I'm lucky. And that sucks. But I just, oh, this infuriates me. I'm sorry. This is just sucking.
And relating back to the repeating problem, you would think that if the teacher is having a repeating problem with a student, they'd bring it to administration and be like, I'm having an issue with this kid. And that's when the parent-teacher conferences need to come into play and say, your kid is continually doing this. And if he is, then hopefully the issue can get resolved. Maybe you can switch a class or something, because you shouldn't have to, you should go to class to learn, not get kicked out. So.
You can say something on this topic, because I had like a question that's sort of related.
Well, I just want to say, as a dean, I do push back a little bit on teachers and say, what have you done to try to resolve this situation? And I think that's really important, because if you don't have a relationship with the student, you know, you're just sitting in judgment and you're not really getting to the root causes of behavior. And I don't believe students care what you know until they know that you care. And once they know that, then they'll work for you. And you know, you have a good relationship and you know when someone's having a bad day, and you can just be compassionate, be a human being about that, right? But I do push back on teachers that, just so you know, there are administrators that do that. If you're gonna send a child out of the room every day, we're gonna have a problem, because what are you doing on your end to try to build a relationship with that child and help fix this? So.
And then our next slide is suspensions and what that group proportionally should be getting.
Just really quickly, did you want to say something before we?
Oh, well, it was just sort of like on the touch of GT, because it was by race and then by the extra stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And from personal experience, GT is like a smaller class of people, and so you get to know those people more, so like you have a better relationship with those teachers because they're specific teachers. So like all of that communication happens because you're in smaller, so maybe that's why like you touched on how it's harder in bigger schools because there's so much going on that it's harder to have those communications, and like maybe that is like, there's your proof, because from experience. So yeah.
Just to kind of add on to that, there's like 7 periods a day, and you have 7 classes of students that are about 30 students, and that's like a lot of students you need to kind of pay attention to. So yeah, that probably does play into the effect of how many suspensions there are too, because you know those major, or I mean not suspensions, major disciplines, because of how big the class sizes are and how many students you need to get to know, and then you have to learn another base next year and the year after that.
Like at Galena, we only have 3 classes a day, and I think that kind of helps, because you have like 135 minutes or something, 100 something minutes with the teacher, so you get to know that teacher and they understand that, you know, they get to know your personality better, where if you just have them for a little short time over and over again, it's not going to be as...
I mean, I think it's also, if you have 7 periods a day, your classes are 50, 55 minutes long. You have one kid who's disrupting it, they're disrupting it for everyone in the class. So of course, you're going to send him out, because it's that kind of double-edged sword. You send that kid out repeatedly because you don't have the time to deal with that kid, because you have 29 other kids in the class who expect to learn. And so, but then you're also expected to teach, to talk to that student, and really, because the day is so fast-paced, you have no, it's really hard, I mean, to do both.
They don't have time to
They don't have time
Right.
to notice. I mean, you spend time talking to the kid who's repeatedly disrupting class, and all those other kids who are there being well-behaved and who may or may not want to learn, but they're there and they're willing to, then it's that there's no time, just because of how short every class period is.
And then, kind of get off topic, I think that IEP should definitely be a lot lower, because traditionally there's a wide range of reasons why they are IEP. And the teachers, from what I can see, are treating them like every other student, which they shouldn't be doing because of their disability. Like, it depends what kind of disability they have. So like I'm saying, like, if they do have major discipline, maybe that their discipline should be, their teacher should be more lenient with them.
And the IEP should have specific teachers for their disability, so I wouldn't see why IEP and just regular student would have the same teacher, you know? So doesn't IEP have like a specific?
Not always, no. I mean, the prevailing philosophy in education today is that students should be fully included in the regular ed curriculum as much as possible. One thing about you guys need to be aware of with respect to students on IEPs and suspensions, there are laws that protect students on IEPs from being suspended because of the disability. So for example, you were referring to, kids have different disabilities, and the IEP category is large. There's lots of reasons why students are on IEP. Some of them only have a speech impediment, some of them have some serious behavioral disorders, some of them are have major health impairments. So there's a big reason, a big umbrella. But as far as student suspensions with students with IEPs, if we have a student who has a behavioral disorder, we can only suspend them 5 days without convening the entire IEP team to decide if these behaviors are related to the disorder. And if they are related to the disorder, we can't suspend for it.
Okay, that's what I was.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So there
yeah.
is some protection. I mean, that's part of what the federal laws are about with respect to students with disabilities. So.
So I think this one will also show that IEP, it's way over shown for what it should be. And what it should be is the gray line is where in the county, what that group should be proportionally at. And the other graph is where they're actually at.
So the bars, the gray bars within the bar graphs are where we would expect based on the proportion of students but where we really are.
Yes.
Yeah, so if they're over, they're being overrepresented. If they're under, they're being under.
So if, for example, with the whites, it looks like there's some underrepresentation. Is that what I'm seeing?
Yes.
And with free and reduced lunch, there might be some.
It's-
Okay.
Yeah, and this is like through the years, so like the blue bars, yeah.
And so like this underrepresentation you're seeing in the white people is going to be spread out through the others because this is where, you have to have, say, 100 for the school. So when one group has 98, those other two are going to a different group. So that an under is just as bad as over because it gives you to a different group.
So does anybody here, have you thought about this idea of how parents play into this in terms of suspensions? Think about it for a second. Just ponder that question, like how parents might influence a suspension or not.
I mean, I think in all behaviors, the basic behavior you learn from when you were babies from your parents, and then you grow up in that behavior, but also your parents, every parent has a different level of leniency with their child, and they expect some parents are very strict and they're like, you have to behave in school, you have to do this. And also some parents treat suspensions like it's the worst thing on the planet, when you have some parents who are like, oh, my kid got suspended, oh well, my
Okay,
kid
I'm
got
going to rephrase
suspended.
my question. I get what you're saying, but this is what I didn't obviously ask this question correctly. Okay, I want you to think about it from the standpoint of being an administrator. Do certain parents have a louder voice in the schools with respect to suspension? Like, who's going to come flying in my office as an administrator and say, you will not suspend my child versus, do you know what I'm saying? I don't know if you could possibly gain that perspective as a student, but I've seen it as an administrator. I've been an administrator for 13 years and I taught for like 20 before that. So I'm wondering if you guys have any of that kind of perception about how loud parent voice can be in schools and how that influences discipline data. Think about it for a second.
Well, I know that if I got suspended, my dad would definitely get mad at the teachers first before me, because he would probably be thinking, my daughter would never do anything like that. And that's also kind of a big pressure, in my opinion.
On you?
Yeah, because like I have to think, gotta behave in class, or I would have been in so much trouble, and my dad's gonna make a big deal about this, not only with me, but with my teachers as well. So, I mean, that's just my background. But I know that I've had troubles with teachers. For example, like I had a 5th grade teacher who gave me a lot of homework after I went to GT, and my dad got really mad at her because he was thinking that, I can get a whole days of homework after a whole days of school. So, yeah.
Well, think about in the legal system in our country. So maybe, this might mirror it just a little bit. Think about the legal system, like, depends how, how much you can afford in attorney fees, people who go to jail versus people who don't. And so if my mom can afford some really high end attorney, then maybe I don't get in as much trouble as somebody who can't. So I want you guys to think about that for a second.
We're on the next slide. Sorry, thank you.
Going forward, I want all the students to remember that this is your dialogue. So I want you guys to come up with your ideas. So right now, what can you do to make an impact on those 2 slides that you were just presenting?
Well, a lot of us are probably pretty well connected to certain groups among the schools, and with that we can, talk to our peers, bring them down from what's actually going on, because, like they said, some teachers may not actually have time to talk to their students about problems of why they got kicked out of school, their class, or why they got suspended. And then the student, instead of talking to their parents or counselor or someone, they'll end up bottling it up and then just get more frustrated, more angry with the teacher or administration, anyone that they think is responsible. But if someone comes in and talks to them, it'll bring that anger down, that hate down, and they can end up seeing why they got kicked out. It's usually just one side, like, I didn't do anything. Why did I get kicked out? That's their first response. But they don't look at what really happened. So if you can talk to them, make them see that, then they'll more likely to understand why.
So in our first discussion, we also talked about taking the adult out of the room. So I know North Valley just talked about doing a peer court. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a group of students, if someone's in trouble, like they would tell that group of students why they got in trouble versus an adult where they might hold back a little bit. So we feel like taking the adult out of the room kind of takes back some of that, and then the student court can tell administrators rather than the student that will hold back for that. So
I think that's a really good idea. Is that the only person who's going to see really from truly a student perspective is a group of students themselves, because you can say adults can say, oh, I see your perspective, but students, all teenagers go through things that really only teenagers can understand, and even if everyone's been a teenager, it's so different now than it was, that I think it really listening to the student, encouraging that student to speak, and even if there isn't a student court, if students can help other students, encourage them to be the better person, to go engage in conversation with the teacher, instead of being like, oh, I hate this teacher, being the person who goes in, and if the teacher isn't going to engage in conversation with the student then should go engage in conversation with the teacher. And sometimes you need other students to bring the student down from their anger high level to see it in a picture that can stop it. So I think better communication is key, not just teacher-student, but student-student, helping engage in other conversation.
I think we need a more trusting environment in our school, in the sense, I think that maybe we should have a student be able to talk to their peers and also their teachers, so maybe kind of create a more trustworthy environment in that sense.
So this is going to be major discipline broken into sects as well as the groups. Once you get to grade bar where it should be bar group where is there anything that stands out, or do you think it's represented at your school?
Well, obviously the male standards stand out quite a bit, and that could have been, and I know you guys don't know that, but what touched on about guys wanting to be more hands-on, so possibly being more rowdy. Sorry, be like.
I don't think that.
No, it was him, but then yeah, you said something else about how like guys might get not mature as well, so maybe they were like, oh, this is just like play, so let's just have fun with it since we're doing it anyways, and take it to the next level. So I don't know, but maybe that will play into it, but I'm not sure. Just an idea.
Well, I'm seeing a pattern in our class discussion we went to the graduation rates for females was higher than males, and now we have the discipline where the males is higher than females. And I think it also relates back to maturity. Like someone said that it's proven that females mature earlier than males do, so I believe that plays a role in this data.
And just keep in mind, that's also elementary school, middle school,
Oh, okay.
boys and girls.
Our next slide is the same thing, but with suspensions. It's similar trend going on.
I think with this, less females are probably suspended because it's most likely that like if they get in trouble once, they'll be like, oh, I need to stop acting this way, and then they'll like tend to stop so they don't get to the point where they're getting suspended. And with boys, kind of like carefree. If it happens, then it happens.
Anything else?
Well, I think too, just society and the way that boys are allowed to express themselves or encouraged to versus girls. Girls can often deal with anger in different ways than boys, and society kind of puts some rules in place from a young age. You know, oh, you need to be a good little girl. Good little girls don't do that, and it's okay for boys to be rough and tumble, and you know those kinds of stereotypes.
And I think relating back to her, the way females deal with their problems, they usually gossip and stuff, you know? And we don't usually get suspended for doing that, where males take it out physically. And that's when they get in trouble, because I think you guys can all relate that girls gossip more than they like, you know, take action, where boys, they don't really talk it out, they just take action.
One point I want to raise on the suspension data, though, just so you can think about this, is that there are, again, there's a broad category of suspensions. So the ones that you guys are really talking about are kind of aggression, fighting. Many of our suspensions in the school district are related to drug and alcohol use because they're mandatory suspensions. So I'd be interested to look at this data and dig down a little bit deeper to find out why kids are being suspended from school.
Yeah, because you can't really apply the gender issue. I mean, you can, but it's harder when we're not talking about aggression, we're just talking about drug use.
Well, I mean, the thing that pops out to us when we look at it, we think we go to this place of aggression, but my experience as an administrator will tell you that there's most of the suspensions that we're kind of forced into as administrators are related to drug and alcohol use or weapons on campus, that kind of thing.
And I'd say I agree with you. Just in my school, I don't know about your high school, but I've seen like 2 fights maybe this year, and the MICs that I've seen given out is like way more. And I've seen just mostly boys getting in trouble for that. I don't think I've seen an MIC given to a girl at like a school dance or anything at all, ever. I think there's something like behind that.
This final graph is just, it kind of shows how your discipline kind of affects you overall in school and how you're not going to be on track most likely if you have 2 or more suspensions, which is great. And at 1 suspension, you're pretty close. 53% are on track, meaning they have all their credits for whatever grade they're in and they've passed whatever tests necessary. Where with no suspensions, you have an 80%.
I think that kind of ties in. You have to look, because if you're suspended multiple times, you have a hard time learning that, but also the people who tend to be suspended the most are the ones who often have difficulties graduating in the first place. So I think it has both that having multiple disciplines, it keeps learning, but the people who tend to have multiple disciplines are the ones who have other things impeding their learning in the first place.
I'm asking you as like administrators, is there a time of year where suspensions go up because?
As soon as it gets warm.
Yeah, and is there any way we can like somehow decrease that? Anything you could do?
Well,
in this
one of the things that you guys might not be aware of too is that certain types of suspensions, for example, drug and alcohol, we up the ante each time a kid gets busted. So the first time a kid gets busted for, let's say you come to high school, it's a 3-day suspension with 7 days waived if your family goes to drug and alcohol intervention. The second time, it's a level 2 offense, they're suspended for 5 days. Then if they come a third time, and this is from 7th through 12th grade. So if we had a kid who came high school in 8th grade, and then again in 10th grade, that suspension in 10th grade is a 5-day suspension. So, you know, one of the questions we would hope we're looking at is how is suspension impacting overall student achievement? Is it affecting our graduation rates? Those are the questions that we want to be asking. But are there certain times of the year where it's worse? Most definitely in the springtime. At least that's my experience.
I would agree. One thing we've put into place at our school, similar to yours, is something we call restorative practices, where we try not to suspend, because we know we know this, and we know that there's something called the school to prison pipeline, and that we're setting kids up for failure. And so we want to help them make better decisions, and we come together in a group where they have peers involved, and try to help them be restorative and fix their behavior in school, and you know that it's part of the learning process sometimes that we have to learn how to act differently and make better decisions. So,
but we are under, you know, we still are under strict district guidelines in terms for uniformity in terms of drug and alcohol suspensions. That so we don't really get to do restorative. If the kid comes to school drunk or high, it's prescribed by the district, and we are supposed to be operating under the same guidelines. So it's not different from school to school, and so, you know, sometimes even if you're an administrator, you don't really think that suspension is the best thing for the kid because maybe the home environment's even worse than being in school high. We're still sort of forced into that.
Maybe that's why they came to school like that, because of their home life and they were trying to get
Well,
away.
you're right, and there's so many, I think Michelle's point is well taken, that it's, there are many connected correlative issues, and sometimes it's very hard to parse those out and figure out what's the root of the problem.
And then also, I understand the minor consumption piece to that, but I know a bunch of students at my school that look at suspension as time off school, and they would prefer, I mean, what are they going to do suspended, and they stay home for a week, and that they look at that as kind of like a reward or a benefit.
So that's what you want to talk to you guys about. What do you think about this practice?
I do know, because we have a dean and a principal, there's also, as a teacher, how I deal with discipline is I will straight up take the student outside the room for 5 minutes. We will talk about it. And in my 8 years of teaching in brick and mortar, I probably had to send a kid to the office maybe 3 times. These were 3 separate instances over 8 years and stuff. And that 5 minutes has saved such huge headaches and stuff like what we've all been talking about. There's, unfortunately, not everyone does this, but if everyone took 5 minutes to just deal with this problem head on and talk about it, I think it would just really bring the topic.
Did you have something, Claire?
Well, it was sort of like an awkward question because I'm not sure if it like applies or not. Because earlier when we were in our first talking about the climate and stuff, we noticed all the kids ditching, and then the percentage of people that were using like illegal substances or not of age substances. And so maybe that's like cutting this graph in half to where these are the kids that were like those low percentages are what we're focusing on here now. And then the rest of them that we're just ditching altogether are kind of still out there doing their own thing. And then this is like the basis issues. So like maybe those focus groups that we were talking about with the kids that were using those small percentages of substances are now being seen here in the bigger picture on their part. So we're narrowing it down and seeing that and using the data to do that.
All right, well, thank you. You guys are staying in here for the
Workshop.
workshop.